in cereal. In fact, every cereal is basically you're eating sugar. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. And if you knew how sluggish I am in the morning, you would know I need some cereal and I need it now. I want sugar. I want instant energy. But I'm telling you, that's the nature of cereals. They are basically pure sugar. Now, if that's all you eat, then you're going to get diabetes. And again, and this we don't understand this, is that glucose and certain diets can result in this disease. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to put a big question mark here. Okay, there's a lot we don't understand about this physiologically, and even more we don't understand about this evolutionarily. This is just not fair. It's on my list of topics for God. Because really, I mean, if you're going to make us love sugar, what's the deal here? Really? Now, you would say, all right, well, let's find out what the ingredient monomer is for starch, and what the ingredient monomer is for cellulose. Let's find out the railroad track. Well, it turns out that the monomer for starch is glucose, and the monomer for cellulose is glucose, and now you're speed dialing your lawyer again. It's like, what's the difference? If they have the same railroad car, how can they be different? Well, a little voice in your head says, remember what he told you 10 minutes ago? Could be the architecture's different. And in fact, the bond angle between the monomers varies between starch and glycogen and cellulose. So if you look at which carbon it is that forms those bonds, those lines, not the dotted lines, the straight line covalent bonds, these angles take you from, let's say, carbon 4 to carbon 2, carbon 1 to carbon 6, carbon 3 to carbon 5. They're different architectures for these different polymers. And it gives them very different chemical properties. In fact, if what I've told you is true, and that cellulose contains just pure sugar, and I've also told you that cellulose is what plant walls are made of, which is what your notebook is made of. Your notebook is made of wood pulp that was smashed into a flat sheet and sold to you in notebook form. If everything I've said is true, then you ought to be able to eat your notebook. Very sweet. So why can't you eat your notebook? Well, the reason you can't is because that bond in the cellulose turns out to be very hard to digest. Glycogen's easy, starch is easy, that's not easy. And so, there are only certain animals on the planet, so cellulose, just put another arrow coming out of cellulose here, hard to digest. Cows can do it, horses can do it, anything that eats grass can do it because they have certain bacteria in their gut that has exactly the right tool to break those bonds. Now that's going to get us into enzyme stories, which are, I'm going to postpone. But I mean, I'm just telling you, there's chemical aspects of these polymers that are a function of the architectures. So the bottom line of the story is that these three things are also isomers of each other. They're isomers at a larger scale. The scale of the railroad train, not the scale of the individual car. Okay. That's carbohydrates. Okay. We're now going to move on to part B, which is lipids. Another name for lipids is fats. Another name for fats is hydrocarbons. Again, indicating H is present and C is present, but no oxygen. That would be an 8, ATE. There ain't no 8 in hydrocarbon. Sounds like carbohydrates. Rearrange the roots a little bit, but there's no 8 in there. So, the first point to make is that most of these, if not all, are hydrophobic. Because I've told you before that CH bonds and CC bonds, unlike CO bonds, are non-polar. Now the first category of lipid that you need to be aware of, and this for those of you who are studying nutrition for the sake of ESS or other majors, pay special attention to this story. The first type of lipid are what are called the triglycerides. And again, a lot of these words sound big, but when you break them down, they're easy to understand. So we have three of something, I haven't told you what yet, and then we have a molecule called glycerol. And glycerol is very similar to propanol, which is part of that series we talked about before. So if you have one carbon with an OH group, you have methanol. If you have two carbons with one OH group, you have ethanol, which is commonly called alcohol or liquor. And then if you have three carbons, you have something called propanol, because you just added an OH to propane. Propane is another type of fuel. But glycerol has three carbons plus an OH group. It's just that it only has one OH group. Propanol has three OHs. So glycerol, no, I got this backwards. Sorry, I do this sometimes. 3, 1. Please correct that. Glycerol, I'm going to draw 3 carbons decorated with hydrogens. But each of these carbons then has an OH. I should have seen that coming because ethanol only has one OH. We went over that before. It's got an OH at one end. Okay. So glycerol is one of the ingredients of triglycerides, and the other ingredients are what are called fatty acids. And these fatty acids are long-chain hydrocarbons. So I've got them drawn here in a way that I'm going to put underneath here just to kind of summarize this in a cartoon form. So there's glycerol, okay? Can everybody see this? 3 black circles, those are the 3 carbons. 3 OHs, those are 3 red circles, and a white tiny little circle beneath them. So that's the glycerol. And what I'm going to make an analogy here to is that's going to be sort of like a loading dock. And what we're going to drive up to the loading dock are 3 semi-trailers, 3 18-wheelers. I'm not going to draw the other 2, but you get the idea here. They're going to pull into the loading dock. Well, what the hell, just draw. Because I want to emphasize that some of these 18-wheelers are straight, and some of them are crooked, and that's going to turn out to be very important. All right, so we're going to drive these 18-wheelers up to the loading dock. And when we get there, we're going to dehydrate the OHs in the same way that we talked about with the 2 glycines. So there are the 3 water molecules that we take out from the interface. We're going to take off those OHs and take off those H's. And we're going to then end up with the net result is shown here, which is the triglyceride. So on this side we have the triglyceride outcome. So this is the macromolecule that results from dehydrating glycerol and 3 fatty acids. Now notice carbon, 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 hydrogens decorated, just hydrogens and carbon. That's all these are. These are hydrocarbons. There is no oxygen except at the front end. And that's actually why we call them acids, because this is a COOH group at the front end, so that's where the acid is located. You just have one acid at one end, the rest of it is pure hydrocarbon. Now, triglycerides come in two types. There's oils and there's fats. And an oil is a liquid at room temperature, and a fat is a solid at room temperature. Now I want you to know the difference and why there is a difference. So an example of a fat at room temperature is bacon fat. An example of an oil at room temperature is corn. It's bacon fat, corn, oil. They're both triglycerides, and so I want you to understand why they are different. Why one is a solid and one is a liquid. And it has to do with, so there's bacon fat. That's actually what it looks like, triglyceride. Notice all these semi-trailer trucks have straight hydrocarbon chains. In other words, these are all single bonded carbons. But notice in the case of corn oil, we have lots of double bonds. So an oil has lots of double bonds. In fact, we call these poly for the lots, unsaturated triglycerides. Now what does unsaturated mean? Well, what that means is that in the case of a bacon fat molecule, you have the maximum number of hydrogens that you can possibly have. You've got hydrogens plugged into every single carbon. All of them are single bonds. You have as many hydrogens you can load it up with. But that's not true here. You pulled off hydrogen. Notice there's no hydrogen right there. You pulled it off. You made a double bond. There's no hydrogen right there. You pulled it off. You made a double bond. So this does not have a maximum number of hydrogens. So it's not saturated. It's unsaturated. Not only that, but there's lots of examples where it's not saturated. So it's a polyunsaturated oil. So you see this in lots of advertisements for healthy foods. They have polyunsaturated oils. You say, well, why is that? What difference does it make? The difference is that when you have straight lines like this, you can pack them solidly into a condensed hunk. Whereas when they're kinky, and this is how I remember it, so double bonds are kinky. You can have a t-shirt made up like that if you want. Advertise in class. Literally, the reason for this is that when you have single bonds, they can rotate around each other very nicely. Thank you, they're very flexible. But if you make a double bond, you automatically lock them into a particular configuration that creates an angle that is not 180 degrees. So every double bond has got a kink. Then you say, well, so what? Well, I'm going to play the role of a bacon fat molecule for you. And this corridor here is going to be your carotid artery leading to your brain. Let's say that little box on my cart is your brain. So we just got out of Sonic and we had a huge hamburger full of bacon. And we're feeling really good. Lots of energy and lipids. But these bacon molecules are making their way through your carotid artery up to your brain, and they're hydrocarbons. They don't like water. And so if they get a chance, they're going to get out of the water, and they're just going to lie on your artery wall. And the next one that comes along is going to lie on top of the previous guy. And the next one that comes along is going to lie on top of the second guy. And you're building up a layer of fat in the very artery that's leading to your brain. So you fast forward this movie 20 years, you've got so much clot buildup of fat in your carotid artery that one day you just go, you get a stroke. You die. So bacon fat, if you have too much of it, can lead to clogging of the arteries. Whereas polyunsaturated fat, you can't stack them. Yes, they don't want to be in the water any more than bacon fat does. But they can't stack on each other because they won't wiggle around. With all the kinks in them, they can't solidify. They stay liquid. So this is kind of a counterintuitive consequence of molecular architecture. I mean, this is one of the reasons you need to take biology. It'll save your damn life. Stop eating bacon every day, morons. All right, so triglycerides was number 2. Number 3 is going to be something called phospholipids. Now, we know what that is already. They're hydrocarbons. But what the hell is that? What are we going to put on these molecules and why? So a phospholipid looks like this. There's 2 of our fatty acids. There's the loading dock of glycerol. But where the hell is the 3rd fatty acid? We took it off. And in place of the 3rd fatty acid, we can put a PO4 group, a phosphate group, which is negatively charged. It's extremely hydrophilic. So we've made a molecule here, which a psychologist would call schizophrenic. Schizo means split. Phrenic means mind. They're split-minded. The best schizophrenic character from literature is Gollum. Gollum wants to be with the hobbits, but he hates hobbits. I love hobbits. I hate hobbits. Can't make up his mind. Love water. Hate water. Love water. Hate water. What are you going to do? So I want to illustrate this with this model. I always hate bringing this down in the elevator because people think it's a blow-up doll. It is not a blow-up doll. It's just a mummy. All right, so this is going to be a phospholipid. It has a head, which is phosphate, which loves water. I heart water. The head wants to dissolve water. But the tail hates water. So now, what would happen if you poured phospholipid into water? I have a beaker and I was going to act this out, but just work with me on this. You're the water, okay? It'll stick its head in the water because it's hydrophilic, but it wants to keep its tail out. In other words, it will form a film on the water. Okay? But now what if you shake everything up and you force it to go in somehow? It does something utterly magical. And when things do magic, I actually have a little wand here. Phospholipids will do this. They will form a bilayer. So there's the heads pointing toward the Mickey Mouse water on both sides. But the tails are away from the water, tucked neatly inside this bilayer. So there's one layer, there's the other layer. It's a bilayer. It turns out that if this bilayer is a sheet and you let it flop around, eventually it will find itself and form a sphere. That sphere is what your cells use as a membrane. So in your notes you need to say, cell membrane equals phospholipid bilayer. So I'll either call it a phospholipid bilayer on the test, or I'll call it a lipid bilayer on the test. But that's what your cell membrane is made of. Now, there is an example of this. And by the way, phospholipids, like I said, they have one foot in one world and another foot in the other world. The water world, the oil world. That's what all soaps are made of. Soaps are made of phospholipids. They're made from animal fats. They are phospholipids. They dissolve oil into water. They're called emulsifiers or dispersants, or soaps. Those are synonyms. Emulsifiers, dispersants, soaps. Now, it turns out that you can actually force them into a layer. This is phospholipid, or soap. Watch what I'm going to do. I just made cell membranes. They automatically form spheres. By the way, hippies can do this all day. Wow, that's cool, dude. Let me do it again. Wow, that's cool, dude. Let me do it again. We're like OCD, autistic kids. Wow, oh, that's cool. Let's do it again. Just based on the architecture of this molecule, you're making spheres. Is that cool or not? Please, no applause. No, just relax. Yes, it's cool, Dr. Hill. But I don't want to applaud because it would be cool to say that in front of my friends, or do that in front of my friends. Lastly, in the lipids, we have something called steroids. Steroids, I always remember, based upon the Olympics. These have 4 rings as opposed to the 5 rings of the Olympics, but that's an easy way to remember it. They are also hydrocarbons, but they're arranged in rings, not in lines. So this is a nice example of a steroid called cholesterol. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, 4 rings, decorated with hydrocarbon chains. So, example. Cholesterol. And oftentimes in these molecule names you will see a dead giveaway for steroid. Now, OL tells you there's got to be an OH somewhere, and in fact the OH is right there. It's pathetic. It's just one little polar group on an otherwise extremely hydrophobic molecule. And cholesterol will form these clots in your carotid artery just like bacon fat will, because they're so hydrophobic. And so cholesterol is something that doctors monitor constantly and warn you about. All right, let's stop here. We'll take on proteins next time. Thanks for your patience.